Now, if you'll notice in both the periods that we looked at, in the giving before Moses, you had voluntary giving, you had a free will giving. No percentage was imposed, no stipulation, no commandments. The only time that it came in was in the time of Pharaoh and the 7 years of famine, the 7 years of plenty, and where 20% was to be extracted from the people to prepare them for this coming famine. You get into the giving from Moses to Jesus, you see the required giving. Required giving for the Levites, for the festival tithe, for the poor. These were required. And it equaled out more than 10%. It was up to 25%. And then you look at free will giving that also existed during that time, and you had the first fruit offering, which was the best, the top, the best of the heap. And then you had free will offering as well. Well, now let's consider the third. Giving from Jesus to the present. And listen, there are two kinds of giving that is stressed in the New Testament. You want to know what they are? Now, don't you drop over dead, okay? It's this: pay your taxes and give God whatever you want. Pay your taxes and give God whatever you want. Does that blow you away? Now, I get the rest of the time to prove that. First one, pay your taxes. That's not hard. It's the second one that you're going to have fun with. The first one, pay your taxes. This was required, just like it was in the Old Testament. Even during this time, the Jews paid their tithes, they paid their temple tax, they had the Sabbath rest for the land, they had that profit-sharing tax, the welfare tax that we were talking about here. And in addition to that, the Romans were exacting exorbitant taxes from them. So let me have you to look at several passages. Go to Matthew 17. Let's look at verse 24. It says, when they came to Capernaum, those who collected the 2 drachma tax came to Peter and said, does your teacher not pay the 2 drachma tax? He said, yes. And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, what do you think, Simon? From whom do the kings of the earth collect customs or poll tax? From their sons or from strangers? When Peter said from strangers, Jesus said to him, then the sons are exempt. However, so that we do not offend them, go to the sea, throw in a hook, and take the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for you and me. Now, if believers believed in this, they'd be out there on the shore, tossing their rod in and trying to find that first fish, checking in the mouth. So pay your taxes, right? But again, in America, we have our taxes taken out for us, and that helps us out. We come to the end of the year where we got to file our taxes, and we go through that whole process. April 15th, people hate that day. But I tell you what, April 1st, they'd be out there on the shores. If they believe this, they'd be out there casting that rod. They'd be out there in the boat. They already got the net on one side, and they hear a voice. Jesus says, cast it on the other side. But think of this. Jesus supported this. He supported this required giving, didn't he? Pay your taxes. Don't cheat on your taxes. Go to chapter 22 of Matthew. Look at verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted together how they might trap him in what he said. And they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are truthful and teach the way of God in truth and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to give a poll tax to Caesar or not? But Jesus perceived their malice and said, why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the poll tax. And they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? And they said to him, Caesar's. And then he said to them, then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And hearing this, they were amazed, and leaving him, they went their way. Did Jesus support taxation? He did. He supported this required giving to take care of the people, to fund the government. Now, I tell you what, all of the wickedness that went along with it, certainly he didn't support, and he confronted that. And that should be confronted, and that's how we confront it. You know how we confront it? We confront it at the polls. We go and vote. And can I encourage you, if you're not registered to vote for this, as they're calling historical election that's coming up, would you please go out and register to vote? And then if you're not sure who to vote for, would you see me and let me tell you who to vote for. Glad to help you out. Just be glad to offer my services free of charge. It's personal. It's a personal thing, not church endorsement. All right, go to chapter 23 now. And notice what it says in verse 23. Here Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees. He pronounces a condemnation to them, and he says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier provisions of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. But these are the things you should have done without neglecting the others." And what is he saying here? You were paying your taxes, and you shouldn't neglect that, but there were other things that you have neglected that you shouldn't neglect. The weightier things like justice and mercy and faithfulness. If you go into chapter 18 of Luke, you remember the two men who went into the temple to pray? One was a Pharisee, the other one was a tax collector. The Pharisee said, "I fast twice a week, I pay tithes of all that I get." And we ought to say back to him, that's what you were supposed to do. What's so special about that? That was your obligation. That's what God required of you to do. Pay your taxes. I mentioned earlier about Melchizedek. Over in Hebrews 7:14 is where it's mentioned. And it's speaking here about the tithe that Abraham gave to Melchizedek, that tenth. And let me just say, up to this point, what are you hearing? What are you hearing in the New Testament? You're hearing, pay your taxes. And when you even get to some of these other passages that talk about tithing, what's it talking about? Something that they were already doing, which was pay your taxes. He's not telling you to take 10% out of your income and give it to God. It's not here, folks. It's not here. Go to Romans 13. I started to title this message as Tithing Biblical. But then I found out that I'd have to come back and say yes. So I had to come up with another title to try to help counteract what is taught today. So I just said, well, what about tithing? We've been talking about everything else. What about tithing? Romans 13, same kind of principle. Every person is to be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. Go down to verse 6. For because of this you also pay what? Taxes. For rulers are servants of God, devoting themselves to this very thing. Render to all what is due them, tax to whom tax is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. So the New Testament teaches that you are to pay your taxes. That is required giving. Now let's focus on the second type of giving. This is voluntary giving. It's not required. Give God whatever you want. Actually, let me retract myself. Giving is required. It's the amount that is left up to you. Giving is commanded in the New Testament, but how much you are to give is left up to you. Now, the Bible, as I said, gives principles that we should apply in our giving, and you should ask yourself, is my giving sacrificial? You know, you walk in and you haven't thought about giving, and the plate gets ready to come around, and all of a sudden you're pulling out and you're looking to see what you have in your wallet or what you have in your purse. That's not the way you prepare for giving. In fact, it says in 1 Corinthians 16, verses 1 and 2, to plan your giving. So what's the second type of giving? Give God whatever you want. And we get this from several of these passages. If you're not in 1 Corinthians 16, just look up on the screen. It says, "Now concerning the collection for the saints, as I directed the churches of Galatia, so do you also. On the first day of the week, each one of you is to put aside and save as he may prosper, so that no collections be made when I come." Do you hear any required amount given? No, all you hear here is that on the first day of the week, you're to put something aside and save, so that no collections will be made when I come. That's what you're told. Every first day of the week. What's the first day of the week? Sunday. Put something aside so that you have to give, so that no collections have to be made. And what Paul was talking about was the relief that they were given to the poor Christians in Jerusalem.